Hi, Rachel. How are we doing?
Very well. Are we ready to go?
I think we are, and I'm going to just go and share my screen. Here we go. And there we go. So hopefully, fingers crossed,
Nearly
that
there.
should share now. We're there.
Well, we just need it to be in. That's it. Brilliant.
Yeah, we're there.
Yeah, we're there.
Brilliant. Okay. So, thanks, Rachel. We're going to have a bit of a two-way conversation now, aren't we, about the slide deck one that we've produced for workshop one as part of the Nature Recovery Toolkit. And this workshop covers priorities and opportunities. We've got two other workshops covering barriers and solutions and funding and delivery, which we're not covering at the moment. We haven't recorded at the moment, but we wanted to record this first one just as an illustration of how potentially you can use the slides in the slide deck, in the main slide deck that we're going to provide as part of the toolkit, and how you can use some of those slides to actually help deliver your own workshop for workshop one. So we're just going to run through some of those. We're not going to do this as a kind of here's all the slides and here's all the information that's in there. It's actually some key pointers of how to use the slides and how to put them together.
Yeah.
So we're going to run through those now, and hopefully this will be of help and really just give you an idea of how you can put together your own workshop.
Excellent. Because there's some speaker notes as well, isn't there, that accompany these two?
Yes. Yeah. So there'll be speaker notes as well. So just some key pointers again of what kind of key things you need to kind of look out for or be aware of when you're presenting on these slides, and additional resources that you might want to bring in if you want to do some deep dives, for example. But we have chosen workshop one because that is the most progressed to date. And obviously we will be doing recordings for the others. So I think we'll move on. So what we've done is, because there's quite a few slides here, we've broken the recordings down into three parts. So this first part is going to cover, the kind of welcome, housekeeping, introductions, and background on the toolkit. And then we'll come on to part two, which is the scene setting. So that's covering kind of the council's priorities and challenges, and then why nature is important, how nature can help, and the nature recovery reforms can help. And then the third part is actually looking at the discussion sessions and the breakout groups. So brilliant. We'll come on and we'll start with part one.
Yeah.
So great. This is the welcome, housekeeping, and introduction. So next up, a set of slides cover the kind of standard welcome, housekeeping, introductions. And obviously, I think, as part of any workshop, there's key other things that you need to kind of just make sure that you got in place, refreshments, etc. Make sure that people are comfortable and at ease, and that, kind of familiar with other colleagues that are around the table as well. And then we kind of run on to the agenda. Again, as part of the toolkit, we're including some example agendas there that you can adapt for yourselves. And, for each of the workshops, we're kind of setting the workshop time in terms of 3 hours. So that's 3 lots of 3 hours in terms of the 3 workshops. But you might decide to actually, compress those and perhaps kind of shorten the length of the workshops, depending on, kind of in terms of people's availability, but also what you're trying to kind of get out of the sessions. And again, you can adapt these agendas to suit your own purposes. But again, we've got, a standard kind of format in terms of the sessions. So we've got the welcome and housekeeping. We've got, kind of scene setting. We've got the discussion, and then the breakout sessions. So they all follow that similar agenda.
Presumably people will be sending these out to their participants ahead of their workshop as well, won't they? So people will get to see and anticipate what they're going to do.
Yeah, and what we're also intending to do with the toolkit, and as part of the toolkit we've got at the moment, is we've prepared a briefing paper that goes and that accompanies workshop one, and we're looking to do briefing papers for the other 2 workshops, and effectively that can go out beforehand with the agenda and say, actually, here's some background information here, and here's some questions that you might want to think about before the workshop, just to kind of think about what it means for you, and kind of key things around your own service priorities, and things you want to bring to the discussion, so you have some thinking and prep beforehand, really.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. So again, it's really important in terms of workshops to ensure there's kind of clear roles assigned, and particularly around someone kind of timekeeping, and also in terms of someone running the workshop, deep dives, note taking, reporting back on issues, flip chart scribes, and running a car park of other ideas and suggestions that have come up. And again, you might want to do that all yourself, or you might want to kind of spread that across those participants that are in the room, get other people to kind of take charge in terms of running some of the group sessions and reporting back, so identifying scribes and facilitators, etc. So again, it's very flexible in terms of how you want to run it and how you want to work with colleagues. Yeah. So, and again, a key part of this is actually in terms of who's in the room, actually providing sufficient time to actually kind of introduce people to the group, their name, what they do, where they're from, why they're interested in the toolkit, what it means for them, how it can help them, and how it can support their work, which is really important, because at the end of the day, what's their objectives in terms of coming to the session, and what do they want to get out of it.
And it could be an opportunity for different people to meet at work that wouldn't normally meet, from different sections and different areas of the council.
Definitely. So that's a key part of this, really, is actually the whole kind of premise behind the workshops is to actually bring the right people across the council in terms of service leads and service kind of managers, to actually kind of start actually having a conversation amongst themselves about what they're currently doing, what's working well, what's not, and actually exchanging those ideas of perhaps practice in other services that actually can be replicated in others. So yeah, it's really important to just have that, their roles and where they're from in terms of different services.
And it's worth remembering, isn't it, that even though they might not think that nature or the environment is a massive part of their service, it will have some kind of impact. And people personally, most people really love nature to some degree. They like going to their local park, or they might have kids. So everybody in some degree will be able to relate to these subjects and these topics.
Yeah,
so you could have a
definitely.
little bit of an opener that gets people to think about it in their real lives, to get them to open up a bit, and sort of geared up and enthusiastic about the session to follow.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on. So the introduction to the day is, again, kind of the basics in terms of why we're here, what's it all about, a toolkit overview and objectives for the day. So again, it's important to run through why the toolkit has been produced, why your particular council is wanting to use it and engage across council services, and also what's it looking to achieve, really. And again, there's some slides here in terms of first slide about kind of actually the Nature Recovery Toolkit in a nutshell. This is just a really simple explanation of what it is and what it consists of. I think one of the key things here is actually right at the start of the process, even before the workshops, is how do you get people interested and actually kind of wanting to actually free up their time to come to the workshops. And that's a key thing in terms of how you pitch it to people, in terms of what it means for them, and perhaps for them to understand, well, yeah, what can I do, what other things can I do in terms of quick wins or changing our business as usual to help kind of deliver on your council's own whether that's an ecological emergency or kind of nature objectives and obligations. So again, it's just running through what the toolkit consists of here.
Yeah, different colleagues will have different motivations for coming along, won't they?
Yes, definitely. And again, I think the briefing helps with that in terms of just kind of providing a bit of context around that, and those questions they can ask themselves before they come in terms of what's it mean for them. And again, explaining the toolkit products, you know, the templates that are being used, but also the supporting resources and the appendices that are there. And actually, again, there are all these different products that can help deliver these workshops, you know, not only just the slide decks and briefing notes and the agendas, but also the appendices in terms of, you know, the kind of templates that we've got there and useful data layers and other pieces of information that can actually just help this process. I think it's important that probably we wouldn't need to run through all of these same slides for each workshop, because again, you know, what we're trying to ensure is there's some consistency of people attending these sessions, so that, you know, we've run through it on the first workshop, we probably wouldn't need to do that, but we might need to just recap on stuff. So again, you know, a key thing at the start of the workshop is setting those objectives. We've set out some here. You might actually feel, well, there are different objectives we want to get out of this session, but we've put in some suggested ones here in terms of what people want to do. And again, the key part of the whole process here is about bringing people, you know, from across the council together to have that conversation. And what we're trying to do through each of the workshops, so starting with workshop 1 is exploring what are currently people doing in terms of their own kind of priorities, you know, what the challenges they've got, you know, how nature can help, what are they doing in terms of, you know, kind of embedding nature, what's working well, what isn't working well, what could be improved, what's missing, or what could we do more of. And again, that's the first part of, you know, the key part of workshop 1 is just exploring that, and then actually kind of moving on to workshop 2, which is going, well, we've explored, identified some opportunities. Let's start kind of just, you know, kind of sieving those down and kind of looking at what the barriers and solutions are, and actually then kind of workshop 3 going, right, well, we've got some front runners here, let's not forget about the other ones, because actually, you know, once we've kind of reviewed this process, we might want to come back to those. But what are some of the front runners, perhaps some of the preferred ones that we want to look at? And people might want to kind of just, you know, kind of look at how they rank that in terms of opportunities that they want to kind of look at in the first priority. But perhaps when they rerun this process, look at other opportunities that they might have previously ruled out because of various different barriers. But it's not to say that they might not be, you know, kind of a good opportunity to consider further down the line.
And it's really important to remember that across your council, people will be doing things that other people in the council won't be aware of. So it's also sharing what you're already doing and celebrating, you know, what you're already doing. And do you want to do more of it, or does another part of the council want to pick up what somebody else is already doing?
Definitely, and I think, you know, that's a key part of the workshop. Really, workshop 1 is about celebrating that and, you know, ensuring or kind of passing on that knowledge and experience from stuff that has worked, but also stuff that hasn't worked that other departments might think, oh yeah, we haven't thought of that, or actually, yeah, that could work for us. So I think, you know, whether or not that's changes to contracts and procurement to kind of, you know, kind of lever in additional kind of nature considerations, particularly in terms of buyers of products, or in terms of, you know, how other services and maintenance contracts are run in terms of making them more kind of nature friendly, whether that's kind of in terms of pollinators or use of spraying, etc., through to more kind of ambitious stuff. So, you know, in terms of tree planting and green infrastructure projects, people might have already been installing sustainable urban drainage or doing tree planting, and others might go, oh, actually, yeah, we would like to do that, but we don't really know where the funding is, or how do you start with that? So again, it is about celebrating and sharing that kind of experience today, which is it's really good. And, you know, it's just enabling that kind of cross fertilization of experience and sharing that experience with others.
Yeah,
So
sounds good to me.
yeah. So, and again, you know, this is about getting the conversation going and looking at some of the quick wins to move on from business as usual. And I think that's the key thing about this whole toolkit, is moving on from business as usual. You know, we are kind of conscious and aware that, you know, time is precious. We've got lots of people that are, you know, lots of priorities, and people are really busy. We haven't got, you know, in terms of resources and funding, it's really, really constrained. So actually, what is actually achievable, what can make an impact with perhaps not many resources or funding, that actually can have, you know, a really good impact, but then lead on to other things.
Yeah, great.
So we've got, you know, kind of then just, again, it's important that, you know, we kind of at the end of the workshop kind of look, well, let's test the objectives. Have we actually achieved these? And again, that's done through, just as I said before, just kind of setting out the workshops in this kind of, structured format where we've got scene setting, group discussion, and then breakout groups. So
So
again,
quite dynamic, different things to do as well. It's not just presenting or going
No.
through a standard set of slides. That there's getting people moving about and interacting with each other and adding interest to the actual format of the workshop too.
Yeah, and we've put in some suggested ways you could do that. But again, there may be other ways that work better for your council and the people that you're working with that are actually kind of ones that do really work. And again, we'd really like to be interested to hear about those. So again, it's just really important in terms of just this particular part is going right. Are we all clear on what we're doing here, and are we ready to move on? And that everyone's just given that opportunity to say, well, hang on a second, I've just got a query about this, or I don't understand that, and or actually, can we just clarify this? So I think it's really important just to say, have we missed anything? Has anybody got any burning questions now? And just let people just kind of be able to just kind of, if they've got some things that they really burning questions they want to raise or issues, then allow them to.
Yeah, it's worth one of the tips that I'd give on this one is that because sometimes you do get the chatty people who want to dominate, but part of them feeling comfortable is that they need to say their stuff. So you can have set up an area or a flip chart piece of paper where people can park their ideas, so it's captured and they do feel heard, but they're not dominating the whole workshop or dominating the time and the space.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, again, it's about checking in with your audience, isn't it?
Yeah.
Making sure that, people are heard, that, if there is an opportunity perhaps to park something and put something up, that people can do that, whether or not that's during the sessions or during the breaks or whatever, that, if they do want to kind of put something up, then they've got that opportunity. Brilliant. Okay, so that's the end of part 1. We're going to have a little pause here, aren't we, Rachel?
Yeah,
For 5
bit
seconds.
of a stretch. Yeah.
Yeah, a bit of a stretch. Let's just kind of get that stretching going. And then we will move on to part 2. So let's kick off with part 2. So this is part 2 of workshop 1 recording. And this is the main bulk of the slides, really. This is, again, in terms of the agenda, about scene setting. And we've included, kind of 20 minutes in terms of this scene setting, because again, in terms of people's attention span and, kind of presenting to people, it's, 20 minutes is quite a bit of time for people to take in, quite a bit of information. And again, what we want to ensure actually is that there's sufficient time for the discussion and the breakout sessions. So we've kind of, in the suggested agenda, kept the scene setting to 20 minutes, but you might feel you want to, kind of extend it. If you do, you might want to just have a break in there, or just kind of, just separate it out a bit, so it's not like 40 minutes worth of presenting at people, because again, how much will they absorb? So we kept it to 20. You might want to shorten it or lengthen it. And again, there is a lot more slides in the main slide deck that you can pull out there to extend it or provide a deep dive into certain things. But we've just kind of chosen the next kind of 20 odd slides that we feel just provide enough summary. But again, you've got the briefing notes there that can be provided in advance for people to read up on this and become familiar with the subject. And therefore, you only need to do a light touch here in terms of the scene setting.
Yeah.
Okay. So the scene setting really in terms of this is split into kind of 3 areas, I suppose. One is, what are the council's key priorities and challenges? And that's, a key thing here is just actually, rather than going straight into why nature and how it can help, kind of deliver your priorities, this is just taking a step back and just understanding what are the key priorities that each of the service leads have in terms of their own services, and actually what are the challenges that are kind of affecting delivery of those. Because actually, once people start thinking about their own kind of service priorities and how those been impacted, particularly in terms of environmental impacts, you can then get on to thinking about, well, actually, how can nature help that? So, again, starting off with what are your kind of key priorities and challenges is a really good start in terms of that. But actually coming back to that in the discussion, once you've kind of heard about how nature can help, but we can come back to that that opening bit about what your priorities and challenges are, after covering, how nature and government's nature recovery reforms can help, and what are the opportunities and types of things that are already being delivered. So, council priorities and challenges. We've split this into kind of 4 main areas, just covering what are your key challenges and priorities. Again, it's covering about, we're also facing a twin crisis in terms of climate and biodiversity emergency. So again, just kind of making sure that that link between the two is made, because sometimes, climate and nature are kind of divorced from each other, and it is making sure that that we do cover that in terms of they are inextricably linked, and can help each other. It's kind of one with the other, really, in terms of helping kind of both the crisis, but also those environmental impacts affecting service delivery, getting people to think about that. And again, perhaps as part of the discussion session, is bringing in some of the data layers and tools that can be used by people in perhaps an interactive group discussion to go, well, actually, here's some plans of our kind of local authority area. Here's some plans that show where there's kind of areas liable to flooding or air quality issues or access to green space or opportunities for doing X, Y, and Z. And let's just look at that practically on the ground. What does it mean for your service in terms of your own assets or some of the services you're delivering? Start looking at a map, because actually it's only when you start looking at a map and people go, wow, I've got my depot there, or I'm doing this there, that they kind of go, oh, actually, right, this map's telling me something about some of those impacts that perhaps I wasn't aware of in terms of future heat stress or access to green space, that actually, if we improve that, could actually help benefit and kind of help deliver my priorities. So again, how do you link those policies agendas together?
And it's worth noting, isn't it, that lots of people find these subjects really big and overwhelming, and that can switch people off. But the fact that you've got people turning up and willing to participate, and actually this helps to break those down into sort of real sizable, real chunks and meaningful chunks that people can go, I can relate to it because of that, or I can relate to it because of that, because it affects me or my job or my service in that way. And it all feels a little bit more achievable than this big, overwhelming climate or biodiversity crisis.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, it's quite hard for people to actually go, well, what does it mean for me? It
Mm.
doesn't really mean that much to me. I kind of work in, a different service that don't really have much kind of to do with nature. But actually, there's all kind of things that actually services do, whether or not, again, in terms of procurement and contracts or other types of maintenance, that potentially, in terms of business as usual, could make some quite easy changes to actually help positively contribute to kind of your overall environmental and ecological objectives. So we kind of start here, and I've put on the slide here about key challenges and priorities. On the left, we've got some kind of typical kind of issues that councils across the country are facing. And again, what I've got in these slides and all the slides that we've got is there are going to be some slides that have a red title, and that red title is just kind of giving a bit of a heads up to you that actually you might want to localize this and actually provide perhaps on the left hand side some of the key issues that your council key challenges is facing, and actually on the right hand side, or the other way around, what is your corporate plan saying in terms of what the priorities are for the council and how it addresses those kind of challenges. So again, it's actually kind of coming back to that, well, what's the kind of top down position here in terms of what the priorities that our council is setting us in terms of our own service delivery that we need to deliver on, and therefore in terms of our own service delivery plans that need to kind of report back to that, and vice versa.
And it's likely it'll be very similar. And it's great, isn't it, to know that everybody's facing very similar challenges.
Yeah.
But it's also likely that the language will be different depending on what what language your council uses.
Yeah, definitely. And you've got your service delivery plan. You might have your own kind of policy, it's a transport plan or a housing plan or a health plan that, yeah, will have its own direction. But again, how can you start looking at that? And particularly through kind of, the lens of, well, how can we do things differently, or the business as usual can change? So that's that one. Again, it can be adapted to suit whatever. But again, it's just reminding people of the bigger picture there in terms of the council priorities and what ultimately each service is striving to do to meet those priorities. But again, as I've said, it's really important just to mention that on the previous slide, we did have kind of, climate change in there, but it's, depending on your council, whether you've declared a climate and an ecological emergency, it's important just to remind people, actually, we are in a twin crisis here, and that we have an ecological crisis and emergency as well, and therefore the two go hand in hand. And I've put that kind of key thing at the bottom there in terms of addressing both together is a win-win, really. And I've included the powers in place in nature report from UK 100 because it's actually a really helpful report on it's a handbook really of the powers that local authorities have around nature. It's a kind of bit of a kind of encyclopedia, which is really helpful in terms of all the different things they can do. And again, one of the key quotes there is from that report here. But again, you might want to amend it depending on where your authority is in terms of declaring a climate and ecological emergency. We know that majority of councils have already declared a climate emergency. Some have declared both, but not all. So moving on to the next slide, again, it's just important just to come back to that. Okay, so you've got your service priorities and you've got your assets and your different services you're delivering. But again, let's just think about, well, how are your assets and your services being affected, particularly in terms of environmental impacts that actually challenge how you deliver those services and manage those assets? So, have you got information? Again, we've got the title in red there, so there may be different impacts that are relevant to your particular authority, but have you got information there, or can you use the data layers to kind of explain, well, we have got changing temperatures, we're in an urban area, so in terms of heat stress, it's going to really impact in terms of our surfaces and our hard surfaces and our roads and other types of assets that actually mean in the future that they're going to need to be more resilient to kind of changing temperatures, but also in terms of increased flooding and existing kind of air and water quality and biodiversity decline, which again can affect lots of different things in terms of whether that's food growing or in terms of actually just general pollinators there and actually managing those kind of habitats and species, but also good quality green space and people's access to it, which again can affect lots of different services and the ways services are being delivered, whether that's health and well-being or education, etc.
Yeah, and it's worth saying as well, one of your biggest assets will be your people. And we're all affected by all the news, the information that we hear about the nature, the biodiversity and climate crisis. And there's lots of studies to demonstrate if you do small things or anything towards, in your own way, towards contributing towards the change, then that really helps to alleviate your eco or your climate anxiety. So running these workshops with your colleagues and your council being proactive and taking steps and coming up with action plans around this will actually really help the well-being of your colleagues and your workforce. Yeah,
definitely. And also in terms of your communities and residents that will be kind of saying, well, what are we doing about this? And often sometimes in terms of that bottom-up approach and local community groups, etc., are really kind of pressing in terms of, well, how are we kind of addressing these kind of climate and ecological emergencies? And as you say, in terms of that kind of climate anxiety and people's worries about that and being directly affected, whether that's through flooding or in terms of changing kind of weather conditions, etc., are all kind of leading to that. And then we come on to the next slide, which is about, well, actually, all these agendas do link together, and actually how do we kind of better understand how they can support each other? And again, that UK 100 on the right there, we've got a bit of a Venn diagram there, which just helps us to kind of compartmentalize, but actually kind of say, well, actually these things are all linked, and if you do one thing it can help another and vice versa. But again, on the left here we've got the ways in which nature and biodiversity can help in terms of how can it help support housing development, how can it help sustainable transport, better health and well-being, climate adaptation and mitigation, reducing flood risk, improving air and water, and thriving biodiversity. Those are all kind of things we're looking to kind of deliver, and obviously nature can play its part in that.
And what's really important to remember, this is not like an incredibly long tick list to go, we've done that, we've done that, we've done that. All of these are interdependent on each other. So often when you do one thing, it'll have multiple impacts and positive impacts across these different areas.
Definitely. Yeah. So we've kind of covered those kind of initial slides on, what's it mean for your council in terms of its current priorities and challenges, and just kind of getting people to think about their own services and how they're impacted. The next kind of slides are really the kind of bulk of ones of, well, actually, how can nature help? And what is the government doing in terms of its nature recovery reforms to help address these? And we'll focus on some of the key kind of legislative and policy requirements. So we'll just run through these. I'm going to kind of run through these kind of like quite quickly, because again, what we have done with all of these slides is include speaker notes and kind of facilitator notes as well. So there's the speaker notes on the actual slides, which is all the content of, the facts and figures behind some of these slides. But then you've got facilitator notes, which are pretty much similar to what we're saying now in terms of, well, you might want to kind of do this, or you might want to focus on that. So everything to help really kind of smooth the delivery of these workshops. So the first slide is obviously, how nature can help. And again, just kind of providing the basics really in terms of how nature depends on all of our, healthy, more resilient communities, in terms of nature, places, people and economy. So again, it's just a visual there that's really, really important. And obviously that quote from the Dasgupta review in terms of the importance of our economies and livelihoods all depend on, nature.
Yeah, and different colleagues will link into different things, won't they? They'll go, oh, that
Definitely.
makes sense to me about health,
Yes.
or that makes sense to me about the economy.
Yeah, definitely. And then you've kind of got, actually, there are some additional hidden slides here in terms of, some of the kind of key facts and figures about the benefits to people and the environment. So again, if you want to take a bit more of a deep dive into why nature is important, you can include that, and you can, kind of actually refer to, those additional kind of natural capital values that, provide quite a lot of important information that might be, kind of actually really kind of resonate with some of the people in the room. But again, we've chosen just to kind of include the core slides here, but there's lots of other slides you can use. So this one, what's the scale of the problem? Again, it's just kind of reminding people that actually that key fact about the UK is at the bottom of the 10% globally and worse G7 nature for biodiversity loss. We are in a real crisis here. And again, it's kind of looking at it through the lens of, well, how is that impacting our economy? How is that impacting our health services? And again, it's having a big impact. And again, we've got facts and figures there that just kind of highlight that really. And I think having some of those key facts and figures really resonate with people and go, crikey, I didn't realise that.
And it's really important to make sure that you look after yourself and your participants, because this is quite hard-hitting information, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's good that you're in a team together and that you've got some nice refreshments, that you make it really welcoming, because yeah, this is quite hard-hitting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And not everybody's aware of this and might be quite shocked.
No, definitely. But it is the reality of the situation. And again, we've got lots of things coming in place that can really help reverse that. But again, that's coming down from government. But again, local authorities have a key role in terms of delivering on those commitments and those asks as well. So again, just running through some of the key legislative and policy requirements there. I'm not going to kind of run through those because, they kind of just run through some of the key acts. And again, what we're going to do in the next couple of slides is actually just run through more detail about the Environment Act. But we have got some kind of quite recent, the Environmental Improvement Plan, which sets some very high level targets in terms of restoration of kind of habitats and again, how does that kind of transpose down to a local level, and how does that kind of actually, what's that mean for local authorities in terms of what they need to do to meet those targets? And again, everything helps in terms of whether that's no matter small or large, every bit helps in terms of helping to kind of reverse that decline in nature. So and I mentioned the Environmental Improvement Plan before, and before I get onto the Environment Act, just to say, again, we've got some additional slides on the Environmental Improvement Plan that actually kind of take through, if people want to do a deep dive on that, there's some practical kind of slides there in terms of, well, actually, what does some of these core objectives of the Environmental Improvement Plan mean at a local level? How can they be delivered? And there's some practical examples there. But I'm going to focus on the Environment Act now. And again, there are some key duties and requirements that have come through, whether that's in terms of local nature recovery strategies, biodiversity reporting duties, biodiversity net gain, they've all come in to help, kind of achieve the objectives about reversing the decline in nature. And they all, kind of have, kind of, an impact in terms of how local authorities deliver their services and manage their land. And again, what we're trying to do through these workshops is obviously highlight, what these, kind of requirements are, but also, what are the opportunities for them? What can they actually provide in terms of whether that's additional funding, resources, or kind of partnerships? What actually are the opportunities that come from these that actually can help a council, actually A, meet some of these requirements, but B, help actually deliver some of their service priorities and their challenges.
Yeah, and it's great. It's great that we've got these tools. I mean, certainly it's the first in my career that we've got this level of legislative support for nature and the environment. And lots of people outside your council are aware of this too, and are really, really keen and eager to help. As I'm sure a lot of you will be aware with all the different partners that you work with. So it's a real moment of opportunity that we're living in at the moment.
Definitely. And I'm going to run through, kind of each of these, but it's also just important to raise that there are additional slides there in the main slide deck that actually provides a bit more information. So what we've got is the core information about what's biodiversity net gain, what are local nature recovery strategies, what's the NERT reporting duty, what's the green infrastructure framework. But what we've also got additional slides on is, well, what does that mean for you as an authority? And again, you can adapt that and kind of say, well, what does it mean? What's the local nature recovery strategy mean for you in terms of the health service or in terms of your highway service? What does it mean? Does it mean about, more funding opportunities, more, kind of opportunities to work in partnership with other, kind of whether that's third sector, private sector, other public sector partners, actually to kind of help deliver more and do more with kind of additional resources and support that you're not on your own, but actually there are others out there that can help support some of this stuff. So again, how does it kind of bring all that together? So obviously we've got mandatory biodiversity net gain that's just kicked in this month in February, and that's again covering the 10% that needs to be provided in terms of net gain on major developments at the moment, and smaller developments will be coming in a couple of months' time, and then nationally significant infrastructure a bit further on down the line. But again, the key thing here is that it has a significant requirement. So whether or not that's in terms of as an authority, whether or not you own your own assets, or you're looking at further development of assets, whether that's kind of schools or that's highways or others, if you're doing some key developments there, it's going to have an impact on you, because you're going to need to provide 10% biodiversity net gain. So again, it's important for people to understand those implications of that, which I'm sure they are, but also actually, well, how can it help you? And again, it's, well, actually, how can you integrate kind of nature into your developments, so that you are kind of achieving as much as you can on site, but also if you can't do everything on site, that, well, actually, what are the off-site opportunities, and actually, are there opportunities for you as a landowner to perhaps mitigate some of your own development in terms of your own sites, in terms of that kind of biodiversity net gain, but also providing off-site solutions for other developments and other private developers, or working with off-site providers to actually provide a local market and support the delivery of a local market for biodiversity net gain. So again, there's lots of opportunities there. So I'm going to go on to the biodiversity duty. And again, the biodiversity duty, the first consideration reporting was, kind of a month or so ago, and a number of authorities have kind of done their first consideration reporting. But again, a lot of other services perhaps won't realise what this entails, and that it's a really important requirement for all public authorities to report on, and consider what they are doing to conserve and enhance biodiversity, their policies and objectives, but also, how they're delivering on those policies and objectives. And again, this is across the council, so there will be a need to kind of review this and look at what you're doing and how you're doing it, and particularly in terms of managing your own land, but also in terms of your own policies and how you actually doing more to actually kind of conserve and enhance biodiversity. So again, there is that reporting that's required. But let's think about, well, actually, what does it mean for you as an authority? And are there, kind of additional things that you can do in terms of managing your own land, making space for wildlife, enhancing protected sites, improving how you manage your buildings, education and awareness, and those processes and policies for preparing for biodiversity net gain. So again, some really important stuff there that, again, can help authorities kind of deliver on this. And then local nature recovery strategies, which are being developed at the moment, and there are 48 of those across the country. We're kind of looking in the next 12 to 13 months of those, kind of being prepared. So kind of by the end of the year, or kind of by March next year, we're looking at those being in place. And again, a key thing here I've highlighted in red, some of those key requirements in terms of mapping the existing areas designated for biodiversity, agreeing priorities for nature recovery. So again, this might help other services in terms of, well, what are those priorities in terms of, well, if you are doing X, Y, and Z, look to incorporate nature in that. Or if there are specific actions or opportunity areas that are being identified in the LNRS, does it cover your assets or your services? And what's it mean in terms of that? There's an opportunity there to actually potentially, if there are opportunities for a local nature recovery strategy of looking at attracting funding in a certain area and creating those partnerships or supporting those partnerships in the area, then perhaps there's more opportunity to do more on your own sites in terms of whether that's tree planting or, kind of additional habitat measures on your sites, but working with partners and potential funding opportunities. So again, it's kind of, looking at LNRS as an opportunity.
There's a lot happening at the moment, isn't there?
There definitely is. And
It's
then
a busy
again, you've got the
space.
green infrastructure framework. And again, this is about, tools there that are available to actually help, kind of deliver green infrastructure, particularly urban areas. And you've got your green infrastructure standards there that, perhaps in more constrained urban areas, it's quite difficult to meet those biodiversity net gain requirements. And therefore, the green infrastructure standards also play a key role in there. But there's lots of examples of of different types of green infrastructure in terms of sustainable urban drainage. There's the green infrastructure mapping that's available there, where you can quite easily kind of toggle on different kind of layers and actually kind of quite simply look at your sites or your area and say, well, actually, we've got these different layers we can put on there and understand the kind of impacts and challenges, but also the opportunities there. So again, there's the journey processes in terms of actually helping planners, developers, and neighbourhood planners kind of plan, kind of better in terms of their green infrastructure. So that's just a quick review of the tools. And again, we've got those kind of additional slides in the main slide deck that can just help you understand and explain what it means for your own authority. And again, you might want to adapt that. So just coming on now, again, we've spent quite a bit of time, or kind of, quite a few slides there, kind of explaining about kind of the policy and legislation. And now really there's an opportunity here of just kind of running through before the discussion and breakout sessions to go, well, actually, yeah, what is your council doing in terms of taking advantage of the new duties and requirements? And so what we've got, there's an opportunity now. And again, these slides aren't the definitive slides that you need to use, because actually what you might want to do is go, well, let's bring in some examples of things that are being delivered in our council, whether that's something in education or highways, or in terms of our waste, or in terms of our maintenance. What are some of the real kind of good examples that are already being delivered there that people might not necessarily know about, but actually, again, Rachel, I think you mentioned right at the start, this is about sharing and celebrating some of that really good stuff that's being delivered. So perhaps in advance of the workshops, kind of when you're engaging with colleagues and about the workshops and about this process, perhaps sending out a questionnaire and saying, well, what are you doing at the moment? Would you be interested in just sharing some of that at the workshop? So again, this is an opportunity to shine a light on some of those things that are doing, that you're doing. But if you haven't got those, then we've got some slides here that can provide some inspiration. And rather than provide lots of text, and they're quite kind of very, very just visual, and again, it's just to kind of give people a bit of a break from a lot of information, just to kind of go, oh, actually, yeah, I see what you mean here in terms of this, if they're not familiar with some of the other types of things that can be done in different assets and services. So the first one, I've just included this really, and again, what you might want to do is compartmentalize this in terms of, assets or procurement or education awareness. But it was a really helpful slide from Sutton Council that provides a bit of a kind of A to Z of quick wins. Here's a bit of suggested quick wins out there, which when we come on to the discussion and breakout sessions, people might want to go, oh, actually, yeah, I might want to consider, some training for our kind of, kind of key managers or officers, or we might want to think about, what is the kind of different kind of things that we can do in terms of ensure that, nature is recognised as critical infrastructure and new development, etc. So, or how do we change our procurement policies? So there's lots of different things there, ranging from some quite quick wins to a little bit more ambitious stuff. And you might have your own that you want to add to this. But I think it's really useful. Again, we start off here in terms of just, one of the areas that people might want to look at, and again, there's an example from Bath and North East Somerset, is how their kind of corporate commitments have kind of built in the declaration of, a climate and ecological emergency, which is that then kind of led on to a number of key developments in terms of supporting that, the role of, identifying and establishing a biodiversity champion for an elected member, and actually kind of, with the role to actually emphasize the environment within the corporate strategy, but also, how that has then led on to setting up, a kind of, an environment team, a new service there in terms of green transformation service, and, kind of several new posts that are collaborating and delivering on green infrastructure, because ultimately you need that commitment at the top level to actually, provide the resources and also the time and capacity for people to work on this. And again, the kind of Bath and North East Somerset's kind of declaration is then kind of led on to, kind of informing the new economic strategy, which, has got a really new approach to local economic development, prioritise the needs of residents and places, whilst also reducing the impacts on natural resources and environment. So, again, people we'll have the links to Bath and North East Somerset, people can have a look at that. And then the next one is, again, how can you take some small quick wins to change your maintenance regimes? And again, this is just an example from Dorset Council that have got their cut and collect service, and how they've kind of implemented, kind of changed there in terms of actually their kind of new regime of, kind of implemented a cut and collect approach to urban mowing across the north of the county, and, how reducing grass cuttings has led to, savings in terms of their mowing costs, that actually has enabled them to then kind of actually purchase new equipment to actually deliver these different maintenance regimes. So again, small things in terms of the maintenance regimes that can be done. And then you've got, in schools, you've got examples here, and this is, from Sale Moorland School, that actually is in Trafford, in Greater Manchester, in terms of some of the pilot work that went on there through business and community, as part of the Water Resilient Cities project of installing rain gardens that, they don't just look nice or kind of a great fun for kids to actually kind of get involved in. Actually, they do something here. They reduce the amount of water that's then kind of flowing over in terms of their surface discharge. So actually, in terms of their surface water discharges, there's a surface water discharge ban that actually, in terms of the kind of water company charging, actually, if you reduce the amount and you go below a band, you can potentially, kind of actually save money there. So actually, is there a kind of save to invest or invest to save kind of model here that could potentially be available if your, kind of water company has those kind of charging bands in place, and you potentially could move between charging bands. But also, they provide lots of other benefits, health and well-being benefits, and, great teaching things for kids in terms of actually understanding what nature can do. So a great example there. And then we've got resilient highways. So again, this is an example from Greener Grange Town, how they've kind of installed a number of, kind of enhancements across the neighbourhood, whether that's tree planting, swales, suds, etc. But, they've kind of looked at how they've kind of estimated the benefit of over 8.4 million over a 30-year period up to 2045 in terms of, kind of a reduction around, kind of uncertainty around wider benefits and the increase in water quality, value in reduction in crime due to the enhancement of the area, the impact of traffic reduction, all of these measures kind of contributing to those wider values. Again, a bit more kind of substantial investment and kind of kind of projects going on here. But again, it's just sowing that seed amongst people of, well, what can we do? And it might be just a small pocket park or a small planter, but that could grow into other things once you start getting the business case for that. And then we've got carbon storage on estates. And again, this is an example from Hampshire County Council, how, they completed some modelling, complex mapping around, kind of the methodology and identifying areas where carbon was stored across the council's estate. And again, this might resonate with, your kind of low carbon team, but also your estates, because you're going, well, actually, we've got commitments in terms of our zero carbon commitments. We need to mitigate in terms of our own emissions. Well, is there an opportunity to do that on land, on our own land? And again, what's the opportunity for doing that, and how can that be done, and what's the business case behind it? But the starting point might be, well, are there opportunities to do it, and what do we need, and how much could that provide? And before you even get onto, well, let's try, plant, kind of hundreds of trees. So again, it's just, what are the things that you can start getting on with that actually starts resonating with people? So that's that one. Again, there's just examples there. We're going to, within the slide deck, have other examples on there as we go along, particularly to do with procurement and contracts, whether that's perhaps on your waste sites or other types of examples that we'll have in terms of that. But again, you might have your own that you want to include here. So I'm just going to pause there again before we go on to part 3. That was the kind of the bulk of the presentation, and this time really on our recording was going through those slides and just how you use it. So part 3, Rachel, we're nearly through the end of this really in terms of the recording, and part 3 is really kind of moving on to that kind of interactive discussion with people around the room. And again, there may be different ways of doing this in terms of whether or not you want this as a kind of a group discussion. There's plenty of time for this. I think we put 45 minutes in the agenda, but again, it's just reflecting and allowing people to reflect, well, what does all of this mean for your services? And actually all of the things that you've heard so far, just allowing people to take stock really.
Yeah, and an opportunity to share ideas and get an enthusiastic. I was just thinking after the last part, wow, what a great sort of getting everything together about what your council's doing already. You could do a really great promotion as well, internally within your authority, but even externally about all the things that you are doing already to address all these problems and challenges.
I think it's an opportunity to take stock. It's an opportunity to actually, promote what you're doing, because sometimes, we're not good at that, are we? In terms of going, well, we've been doing some great stuff. Let's celebrate that. Let's really shout about it, because actually there's some really good stuff going on already. Sometimes we kind of look at that forward look and go, well, how do we solve all these really complex challenges, when actually perhaps some of the solutions are quite obvious, but we just kind of skip over them. So again, this discussion session, we've put in 45 minutes, is just allowing people to kind of just take stock of that and discuss as a group, perhaps, or you might want to break out into smaller groups about, kind of, well, actually, we discussed right at the start about what your service priorities and objectives are. What are the impacts affecting delivery of those? How can the government's nature and how can nature help address those, and what are the risks of doing nothing? So it's an opportunity, as you say, to take stock and to celebrate what we're doing, but also, what are your, kind of real priorities, and how can nature help in terms of that? And again, it's a group discussion, and you might want to help facilitate that and kind of bring in examples and kind of perhaps probe into certain people. Might go, well, I've got these objectives and priorities. I really don't kind of know how nature's going to fit, kind of impact on that or help me with that. And then you could draw on someone else and say, well, perhaps you want to explain, what it means to you, and have that kind of two-way conversation.
Yeah, and this is probably the bit of the workshops that it'd be good to have some support from colleagues, either as note takers, or you will have people and you will have colleagues that are really quite skilled at running workshops, maybe not in this subject area, but doing it anyway, because it's really good to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to contribute if they're comfortable with doing that, maybe verbally or in writing, and that you don't get the people that really dominate, and that you just keep an eye on those things. So if you've got sort of a somebody supporting you, they can have a read the room and get a bit of a sense of that as well, to support you, so that it's got that nice flow to your discussions.
Definitely. Brilliant. So that's the end of that kind of group discussion, and then you kind of have a break, and then actually it's getting into the real detailed nitty-gritty here again, 45 minutes for the breakout session. And this is where we're kind of providing that opportunity for people to break out into groups and actually, you know, kind of start looking at the first part of the action template. And I'll come on to the action template at the moment, but again, this is this process of going, well, what we're currently doing, what's, you know, what's going well, what's not, what are the other opportunities we could explore in workshop 1, and then workshop 2 is going, right, let's delve into a bit more in terms of some of those opportunities about the barriers, what's stopping us from doing those or doing more of what we're already doing, and what the solutions, and then workshop 3 in terms of actually, okay, well, let's just put a bit more on some of those opportunities about what's the funding required and what the partnerships are required to deliver and who else needs to be involved. So we've got this suggested kind of breakout session of, you know, split into small groups and look at the action template. And again, we've provided that as part of the resource pack, and I'll show it in a minute. But effectively, you're kind of mapping out, going across the kind of template as what opportunities are you currently delivering? What are the challenges affecting delivery? What are you doing well to address them? What would you like to do better? What could you do to improve them, and how? And again, with the nature, you know, with nature, you know, in mind there, in terms of, you know, actually how can nature help? And again, we've produced various different checklists and templates that you can use to help inform these breakout sessions. And again, ultimately, what we're trying to do at the end of this first workshop is go from these discussions, what are the immediate opportunities that you'd like to consider further as part of workshop 2? And again, you might want to say, well, we'll rank all of them, but we don't want to kind of lose sight of some of those that perhaps we won't look at in workshop 2 in too much detail, but actually we might want to kind of reconsider further down the line. So again, it's important to kind of not lose sight of everything that you've got, but actually what we're trying to do here is a sieving process to go, well, actually some of the more immediate ones that are kind of perhaps, you know, kind of when you're looking at impact versus effort, you know, what are the ones that have kind of pretty kind of more realistic that you can do right now and actually aren't going to take that much time or resources or effort, but actually are going to have a good level of impact. And those that perhaps are more ambitious, you might want to consider further down the line, perhaps once you kind of have got a better idea of how things are working with the more immediate ones. So here's some of the templates. So we've kind of got, you know, you might want, when you're doing these workshops, you might want to have these as printouts, as A3s, and each group kind of says, well, you know, and we've got kind of lists of services there. Again, there's lots of different services and different types of councils, whether you're a county, a unitary, combined authority or district. So therefore, these services on the left might change. And again, depends who's in the room, but you might kind of list the different services of those that are in the room and actually kind of go, well, yeah, what are we currently doing in terms of embedding nature? What is working well? What's not working well? What are the opportunities to, you know, kind of improve on that, or what's missing? And again, you might want to have that as an A3 printout, or perhaps do that on a flip chart. But it's just some suggested ways of easily collating all of this information. And what you want to do is, again, you've got this template process that I mentioned about workshop 1, workshop 2, workshop 3, moving from left to right in terms of kind of sieving out those opportunities and looking at what the barriers and solutions are, and the funding and delivery. And again, from that Word document that I just mentioned, you know, that you might that printout, you can then start just inputting this. You know, when you kind of finish the workshop, you might just want to start collating all this on the template so that you've got a record of quite an easy flow of how all these things are moving from left to right. And again, you know, additional kind of things that might help in terms of those workshops, you might want to have these on, you know, kind of again, printouts just to help as prompts in terms of what people are doing now, what's the strengths, what the weaknesses, and what the opportunities are, but some prompts there of what else, would they might consider, particularly just a prompt discussion. And then the important part here is, feedback and review. Again, each group presents on what they've discussed and some of those kind of opportunities that they've identified. Again, we've put everyone to discuss and agree on a short list of immediate opportunities. I mean, that's quite an important one. Again, you might want to rank these, or you might want to kind of have the whole list and go, well, these are perhaps some of the ones that the more easier ones when we've looked at, your kind of effort required and the impact that's going to have in terms of these, that you might go, well, we'll rank these and we'll choose the first 10 to consider in a bit more detail in workshop 2. Again, very flexible in terms of how it works, but again, we just put a suggested thing here. But I think it's quite important to spend a bit of time on that feedback, because obviously you want each group to feedback. And again, what perhaps what you want to avoid is that competing thing of, well, we've got this opportunity, it's better than that one, and therefore it kind of knocks that one out. It's kind of like everyone kind of saying, well, let's agree on, a ranking of which ones we want to take forward.
Or it's always cumulative, isn't it? It's always but that table went before me and they've come up with all the great ideas.
Yeah.
But you can play with that a little bit and make sure you manage this, because by now we're getting towards the end of the workshop.
Yeah.
And people will be keen to share, and some people will be quite tired. So make sure that you reassure everybody that everything's been captured, that you'll take it away and you'll consider it. And we're just looking maybe at the highlights for now, so people don't, because there's a lot of people that really actually hate this bit because, oh my God, it's going to be dominated by people. So just be aware of that, and make sure that it's interactive and you get some crucial bits of information, but you reassure everybody that everything is going to be captured and taken away, so nothing will be lost.
Definitely. And then kind of lastly, really, just to finish on, it's just, what we're trying to do in terms of the presentations, but also in terms of the toolkit, is just provide some key signposts there to further support and guidance. And again, this is an initial list, but, it will grow. And again, when we talk to local authorities and they kind of say, well, actually, there's this really helpful, guidance or resources out there that would be useful for other authorities. Yeah, let's put that in there and let's just kind of share that so everyone's got it. So there's, a core list here in terms of just some of the key government publications, but also, PAS's kind of environment web pages. We've got lots of information already on there, particularly around biodiversity net gain and whether that's policy or development management. But also, as I said, before, the UK 100 Powers in Place report, the UK Green Building Council, Nature Recovery and Climate Resilience Playbook. But also, we've got kind of Natural England's kind of green infrastructure framework and other guidance. But actually, there's quite a really kind of useful, helpful information on Nature Scotland that have actually got a whole package of resources there on nature-based solutions for local authorities, whether your schools, highways, all the things we're talking about in services. They've actually got some really useful kind of guidance for each of those services and what SUDs mean and how they can deliver them. So again, there's some real practical guidance there. And then I'm going to finish on that, really. I think we've just run over an hour in terms of this. Again, this is all suggested content in terms of how to deliver these workshops. We are looking to do, additional kind of recordings of the other 2 workshops, but we want to provide this one for you so that you can, have an insight in terms of how these things can actually work and be delivered in practice. So I hope this has been helpful and provide a bit of a quick kind of overview of how to deliver these and how to use some of the workshop resources. And again, a lot of the kind of guidance and support is in the resource pack that we'll also be producing. So
Fabulous.
I'm going to finish.
Yeah, I was just going to add, best of luck. It's amazing that you've decided to do this. Well done. And I hope it goes really, really well for you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Rachel. And thanks very much for your time on this. Absolutely brilliant. And I'm going to, if I can, I'm going to stop sharing and then I'm going to stop recording. Thank you very much, everyone.